Hi, everybody. This is section 1.6. I personally think this is a difficult section because there's lots of different ways of solving. Don't forget, solving for x means tell me what x equals. Anytime you see the word solve. So this is kind of a cross between the rational equations we had, the rational expressions we had last week, and these are rational equations. These are different than we had last week when we factored and canceled, because this week we have equal signs on the fractions. We didn't have the equal signs when we factored and canceled. We just simplified the rational expressions. Here we're solving the rational equations. And the way to do this, let me write down the steps to solve rational equations. In other words, rational equations are just fractions with x's in the bottoms, at least one x on the bottom of the fraction. Step one, find LCD. And I always like to, I hate to say this, no, we'll do it. Find most of each group. So I'm just adding this in because we're going to be using that later on. Once you find the most of each group, the LCD, you're going to multiply each term by the LCD, and then you're going to solve for x. And you could solve for x by just getting x on one side, everything else to the other. You could have to factor using the zero multiply rule, or any other rule we learned for solving. So these are the steps for solving a problem like this. If you notice, and if we're going to solve this, there is a step. I guess, can I change this to step 2 and change this to step 3? I'm sorry, I'm messing up your papers. Change this to step 4, because there is a step 1. Factor anything if you can. Factor all if you can. Okay, so let's take a look at this first problem. Can I factor the top? No. Can I factor the bottom? No. Factor the top? No. Factor the bottom? No. So step 1, factor everything you can. There's nothing I can't factor. By the way, an x by itself just means x over 1, right? 5 by itself is 5 over 1. So this is what we have. So step 1 is find the LCD. And we need one of each item, the most of each item. On the bottom, find the LCD. LCD is least common denominator. The bottom of the fraction. So look on this bottom of a fraction, there's a 4. Look at this bottom of a fraction. It's an x minus 4. And this bottom of a fraction is 1, and when you multiply 4 times 1, you still get 4. This is our LCD. So you take each part of the bottom, that is our LCD. So that's step 1, or 2. Step 1 was factor. We didn't factor nothing. So I'm going to rewrite this now, 4x plus 3 over 4 with a little room. Minus 4x over x minus 4. I'm going to put that in parentheses because it's one group, equals just x, okay? So, oh, no. So this is what I get. Step 3 says multiply each term by the LCD. This is the LCD. So I'm going to multiply this by 4 times x minus 4. I'm going to multiply this term by 4 times x minus 4. I'm going to multiply this term by 4 times x minus 4. So step 3 says multiply each term by the LCD. Watch what happens. Do you see how these 4s cancel? A top and a bottom. 4 divided by 4 equals 1. 1 times anything is itself. You see, so we can say they cancel or they turn into 1. What happens is I'm left with 4x plus 3 times the x minus 4. Do you see? I'm left with this and this. The 4s cancel. Next, this cancels with this. So I'm just left with 4 times 4x. 4 times 4 is 16x. And then I'm left with this. 4 times x is 4x. Then times x minus 4. So I multiply these two together and I get this. Okay. So we factored everything we could, which nothing was. We found the LCD. We multiplied each term by the LCD. And now we have to solve for x. Do you see? I don't have fractions anymore. When you multiply each term by the LCD, the fractions disappear. So I'm going to erase these steps. So if you want these steps, write them down because I think I'm going to erase them. Because I need room. Do you see when I move this, I can't move down with that there. So if you want these, write these steps down, write them down. I'll give you a minute. Yeah, I can actually, I'm going to erase the top part of this. Hopefully you guys have this already. I'm going to erase the top part of this. And rewrite the problem for x plus 3, x minus 4. They picked a really doozy to start us off with. 16x. So this is what we got when we did all those steps. Now we're just solving for x. And if we take out our steps for solving for x, step 1 was distribute. So here I have 2 terms times 2 terms. 4x times x is 4x squared. 4x times x. 4 times 1 is 4. X times x is x squared. 4x times a negative 4. 4 times a negative 4 is a negative 16x. 3 times x is a positive 3x. And 3 times a negative 4 is a negative 12. Then I'm just going to bring this down, minus 16x. I'm going to distribute this. 4x times x is 4x squared. 4x times 4 is a negative 16x. So I distributed everything I could. Solving for x, remember those steps. Step 1 was distribute. Step 2 was add or subtract everything on one side if you can. On the right side, I cannot add x squares with x's. 4x squared cannot be subtracted with 16x. One's an x squared, one's an x. Over here, I have x squared, nothing, 4x squared, but I have negative 16x minus 16x. That equals negative 32x. Minus 16 and a minus 16 is a negative 32. Oh, and I have a plus 3. So I have minus 16 plus 3. I didn't even see that. Is a negative 21. Negative 21x. Minus 16 plus 3 minus 16 is a negative 21. And then I bring this minus 12 here. So we combine like terms on everything on the left-hand side. We combine like terms on everything on the right-hand side, which nothing combined. Now, the next step was get all the x's to one side. So I'm going to take, I almost thought I already said. I'm going to take all this, the right-hand side, over to the left side. Oh, it was. Did I just not write? I didn't write negative 29. Did I say 21? I thought it was. I think sometimes my pen doesn't write everything. That's my excuse, and I'm sticking with it. Thank you, Amanda, before I would have kept on going and messed the whole thing up. See, you guys better keep on your toes. I should give Amanda 1,000,000 bonus points. Maybe the rest of you will stay awake. Okay, so I'm going to take the 4x squared to the left-hand side by subtracting. It's a positive 4x squared, so I'm going to subtract 4x squared. It's a minus 16, so I'm going to add 16 to both sides. 16x. The right side turns to 0. The left side, oh, that turns to 0. Negative 29 plus 16 is a negative 13x minus 12. We're gonna do a few. These are, yeah, we'll definitely do a few of these. I understand. I'm just trying to follow these steps for the first one to get through it. And we have to remember, I mean, you see this problem, once we do that first thing, we have to do everything we've done previously. So solving for x, once we got all the x's to one side, now I need to keep this x here. I need to get this 12 and this 13 to the other side. The 12 is subtracting. The negative 13 is multiplying times the x. You always get rid of the add or subtract first. I'm sorry, my pen is really going crazy right now. So that turned to 0. We're left with negative 13x equals 12. And then we divide both sides by a negative 13. It's negative 13 times x. So we divide by a negative 13, divide by a negative 13. And that looks like my answer. 12 divided by negative 13 is a negative 12 over 13. I hope that's the answer in the back. It's a weird answer. If it's not, I'll come back and do this one later. Somebody check my work, make sure it's correct. I hope it's the answer in the back. I'm always worried when they're weird fraction.
That's correct.
Okay, great. So let's. I know the first one's really confusing. I promise you, the rest will just as confusing. But let's try to follow those steps. Okay, we're gonna try to follow the steps again. I'm gonna erase the left side. And the key is finding the LCD correctly in step, well, after we factor. All right, so I'm going to bring the next problem. Oh, man, look at this. Yeah, they picked some really doozies. I hope we don't have too many of these on the test. Okay, so step 1, factor everything you can. The only thing I can factor is this. 24, you know, it's 3 terms. The number in front of x squared is 1, so it's an easy factor. 24 is 1 times 24. 2 times 12, 3 times 8, 4 times 6. How do I get a plus 5? There's only one way to get a plus 5. A plus 8 and a minus 3. So this factors to x minus 3, x plus 8. Okay, that bottom factors to that. And look how nice it is. Over here, I have an x minus 3. Over here, I have an x plus 8. So that usually happens. So you kind of like when you factor something like that, hopefully it matches the bottoms of the other ones. Then the problem's not too bad. So step 1, factor everything we can. We factored that bottom. Step 2, find the LCD. Okay, so now we have to find the LCD. LCD stands for least common denominator. Denominator is the bottom of the fraction. So do you see there's an x minus 3 on the bottom? That's part of my LCD. There's an x plus 8 on the bottom. That's part of my LCD. This one has x minus 3 and x plus 8, but we already wrote them down, so you don't have to write them down again. Finding the LCD, the least common denominator, is finding each parentheses, and if it has a power, you find the most of that power. Yeah, find the most of that power of that LCD. So this is our LCD. Step 2, find the LCD. You look at the bottoms, and all 3 of these bottoms, 1, 2, 3, contain an x minus 3 or an x plus 8. Okay, so that's the LCD. The next step is rewrite this. I'm going to put LCD over here now. X minus 3, x plus 8. So we're going to rewrite this whole thing, 3 over x minus 3 plus 7 over x plus 8 equals 5 over x squared plus 5x minus 20. Oh, wait. Let me do it correctly. The factored version, x minus 3, x plus 8. Okay, so I'm rewriting it and multiply each of the terms by the LCD. I'm going to multiply the first parentheses by x minus 3, x plus 8. I'm going to multiply the second fraction by x minus 3, x plus 8. I'm going to multiply the last fraction by x minus 3, x plus 8. Okay, is everybody okay so far? We factored this. The LCD is each parentheses, this x minus 3, this x plus 8, and since we already have an x minus 3, we don't write it down twice in the LCD, and we already have an x plus 8, we don't write it down again. Okay, perfect. But Matilda didn't say she was with us. Are you with us, Matilda? Okay, so that was step 3. We're going to multiply, but look what happens. Remember, if you have a top and a bottom that are the same, you can cancel them and turn it into 1. So look at what I created. There's an x minus 3 and an x minus 3. So the bottom is gone there. What's left on top is 3 times x plus 8. Do you see? These two are what's left. The next fraction, x plus 8, x plus 8 cancel. What's left is the 7 times the x minus 3. Here, X minus 3 cancels with the X minus 3. X plus 8 cancels with the X plus 8. And we're just left with a 5. That's it. Step 3 is done. We multiplied everything by the LCD. We canceled, we distributed, and this is, well, we didn't distribute yet, but we canceled, and this is what we're at. Now we're going to solve for X. That means I have to break my steps out for solving for X. No, take your time, Matilda. I understand. So now I'm pulling, you know, once you get to this point, step 4, you solve for X, you have to get those notes that we've taken in the past. I really would have your notes organized for this test. Don't forget, you're allowed to use your notes, your workbook for the test. It's okay. But I promise you, if you're looking for a problem in the workbook for every single question on the test, you won't finish the test in time. I think you get on this test number 1 for 13-14, you get an hour and 15 minutes for the test. 1 hour and 15 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. All right, so solving for X, step 1, distribute. We have to distribute. And I get 3 times X is 3X. 3 times 8 is 24. 7 times X is a positive 7X. 7 times a negative 3 is a negative 21. All right, so solving, we did, if you look, have your steps for solving, we did distribute. Step 2, get all the X, add all the X's together on each side. On the right side, we only have a 5, so nothing adds there. Uh-oh. My pen is broke. There it is. On the left side, 3X plus 7X is 10X. 24 minus 21 is plus 3. And then we have an equal 5. 3X plus 7X is 10X. 24 minus 21 is a plus 3. All right, so now I just need to take the 3 to the other side and the 10. You always take the add and subtract to the other side first. Minus 3, minus 3. X, or 10X equals 2. 5 minus 3 is 2. Sorry, I'm going to give myself a little extra room here. Really, that's why I really like doing this in the classroom, where I stretch out everything on the board. So we're at this 10x plus 3 equals 5. I take the 3 over by subtracting 3. And then I divide by 10. Ten divided by 10 is 1x. 2 divided by 10 on my calculator ends up being 1/5. And that's the answer. What I did was I took this and just brought it up here. Sorry. So I'm going to say the hardest part about this is finding the LCD and multiplying it, and then knowing how to solve for X, because that was what we learned last week or the week before. So you got to remember everything that we've done before. All right, moving on to number 3. It looks like it might be easier. Let's see what happens. I'm going to erase everything. Number 3. Step 1, factor everything. There's nothing to factor in this problem. Step 2, find the LCD. Don't forget 5 is really 5 over 1. A whole number is over 1. So the LCD is whatever's under this parentheses, x minus 5. Whatever's under this parentheses, it's the same thing, x minus 5, so I don't write it twice. I just leave it there, and then times 1. If you put a 1 here, 1 times x minus 5 is still x minus 5, so you don't have to put the 1 there. So this is our LCD. Does everybody get that? Do you see how we get the LCD so far? It's just one of each item, and you don't repeat. You don't repeat. Did you guys think that was your phone? I have my wife get the phone while I'm in here. I think she lets it ring long just to piss me off. Yeah, how sweet. We're driving each other crazy being in the house. And I told her, I'm going to be here till January. They're not letting me go back to school until January. I'll be teaching online again at home until January. So we're going to murder each other. Oh, yeah.
Is that for all of the Alamo colleges, or is that just specifically for you?
Oh, you guys haven't heard? I don't think it's official yet, but they've already told me we are not going back to school in the fall. So in August, we are not going back to school. However, there are some people going back to school, I heard. It's not official yet, but I think like auto mechanics, they have to work on auto stuff. So I think those people are going back for the auto classes, but like for math classes and English and history, I think we're staying at home. Well, I think there's some nurses, I think the practical stuff you're actually going into campus and doing. I think what they're talking about is people who have to do hands-on stuff, like our chemistry labs where you're making experiments and stuff, or whatever they do in a chemistry lab. They're going back just for the lab, but not for the class. Yeah, so, but they'll let you know, they'll let out more. That's what they told the math department, that we're not coming back until January. So we're going to do all our classes remotely. So yeah, I think.
I guess I've been living under a rock.
Well, to tell you the truth, my boss in our meeting last week said that. I said, "Wait, when did you tell us this?" She said, "The week before that." I said, "I don't remember." So okay, getting back. We found the LCD. Now we have to multiply. So I'm going to rewrite everything, but I'm going to spread it out. And I'm going to multiply everything by the LCD. The LCD is x minus 5. And you put whatever the LCD on top of each x minus 5. You see, I'm putting it on the top of the fraction because you're multiplying it by x minus 5 over 1 in reality. These cancel, and I just have x left. These cancel, and I just have 5 left. And this doesn't cancel, but it's 5 times x, which is 5x, and 5 times a negative 5, negative 25. So do you see how once you cancel everything, the bottoms disappear, the bottoms cancel out. We're just left with the x, we're left with the 5, and then we had to distribute that. Now we're solving for x. Look at these two. They can be combined together. 5 minus 25 is a minus 20. You see a plus 5 and a minus 25 is a minus 20. And then I bring the 5x down here. Get all the x's to one side. I'm going to go ahead and take that x over because I want my, no, let's not take it. Let's take the x's to the other side. Let's take it doesn't matter which way you go, but I'm going to take this. I'm going to take this 5x. By the way, I'm trying to do so. It won't let me. There we go. This is where we're at right now. I'm going to take this 5x over. It's a positive 5x. Don't forget you have to add and subtract to get the x's over. So I'm left with 1x minus 5x is a negative 4x. Those cancel, and I'm left with a negative 20. So 1x minus 5x equals a negative 4x. Then I divide both sides. It's negative 4 times x. The opposite of timesing a negative 4 is dividing by a negative 4. And so negative 4 divided by negative 4 equals x, 1x. Negative 20 divided by negative 4 is a positive 5. So this becomes a positive 5. Okay, that's my answer. However, can somebody look in the back of the book and tell me why the answer is not x equals 5 in the back of the book? The back of the book shouldn't say x equals 5, even though that's what I got. What does the back of the book say? Does it say no solution? Anybody?
It says empty set of 0.
Yeah, empty set. That means there's no answer. There's no solution. The reason why there's no solution is anytime you deal with these rational equations and we're solving, before we were just simplifying, and then don't forget we talked about the domain. The bottom cannot equal 0. Look what happens when we put this 5 back in. If I put 5 in here, what happens to the bottom? It turns to 0. Remember the domain, the bottom cannot equal 0. So even though we got an answer of 5, 5 is not a good answer. So you put a big X through it and say, oh, if 5 doesn't work and we don't have any other answers, there is no solution. There are no other answers. The book says empty set. I think in the homework it's just going to say no solution. If it doesn't have no solution, then write down empty set like they tell you to, or click the button. I think it's a button that you have to push or something. So you have to check your answers to make sure it doesn't make the bottom equal 0. Here, the 5, if I plug it back in, it makes at least one bottom equal to 0, and the denominator is not allowed to equal 0. Okay? So even though we got the answer fairly easily, kind of, it doesn't work because when you plug it back in, it turns the denominator into 0, and you're not allowed to do that. Moving on. All right. Step number 1, factor everything you can. There's nothing to factor. 1 is 1 over 1. Write down the LCD. I'm going to give everybody a second to write down the LCD. Type in the LCD or write it down on a paper. Let's see if you get the same thing I do. LCD, did you get x plus 2 x minus 4. Do you see? Here's a bottom, x plus 2. Here's a bottom, x minus 4. That's your LCD. That's the LCD. Everybody okay with that? Because you got to be able to do that. Now we multiply each of these. Do you see? I spread it out because I'm going to multiply by the LCD. I'm going to multiply this first fraction by the whole LCD, x plus 2, x minus 4. I'm going to multiply, that's a 1 there, x plus 2, x minus 4. Multiply this, x plus 2, x minus 4. What's nice about this is the bottom is going to cancel with something. Then I'm left with 16 times x, 16x, 16 times a negative 4, which is a negative 64. So then you distribute what's left over, 16 times x minus. I'm going to do this one over here. That cancels out with this, so I can distribute this. I'll do the middle one in a second. 2 times x is 2x. And 2 times 2 is a positive 4. So I distributed the 2 to each of those. Now the 1's cancel, 1 divided by 1, and I have to use FOIL. X times x is x squared. That's a 2. X times a negative 4 is a negative 4x. 2 times x is a positive 2x. And 2 times a negative 4 is a negative 8. So you have to distribute there. If you notice, we don't have fractions anymore. And then we're going to go through the process of solving for x. Solving for x, the distribute part, we actually did already. Step 2, combine like terms. On the left side, I cannot add those two together, no. But on the right side, minus 4x plus 2x and plus 2x. Minus 4 plus 2 is 0. That all turns to 0. So on the right-hand side, I'm left with an x squared. Oh, minus 8 plus 4 is a minus 4. So on the right-hand side, when I add everything together, I'm left with x squared minus 4. On the left-hand side, I just have 16x minus 64. All right, so I'm going to bring this up here, try 16x minus 64 equals x squared minus 4. Okay, solving for x, we added get all the x's on one side. If you have an x squared, when we're solving for x, I talked about it, if you have just x's like we've had in the past, you get all x's to one side and then numbers to the other. But if you have x squares left over like we do, everything has to go on the x square side. And we did actually talked about that. So I need to take these two over to the x square side, or make sure the x squared is positive. If it's negative x squared, bring it over to the other side. So I'm going to take negative or 16x to the other side. The opposite of adding 16x is plus 16x. Plus 16x. Then 64, the opposite of subtract 64 is add 64. Add 64. Those cancel, and I am left with 0 on the right-hand side. Then I have x squared plus 16x. A minus 4 and a plus 64 is a plus 60. So if you have an x squared, everything has to go to the x squared side and has to equal 0, and we're going to factor it, of course. Luckily, you don't have to use the AC method because there's a 1 in front of the x squared. So all the things that multiply together at 60 is 1 times 60, 2 times 30, 3 times 20, 4 times 15, 5 times 12 is 60, 6 times 10 is 60. I think we got them all. Which one adds up to 16? It looks like 6 and 10. Anything else? No, that's the only one that adds up to 16. So our thing factors XX to plus 6 and plus 10. Plus 6 and plus 10. I'll give you a second if you're writing this down to catch up. All right. And when you have two parentheses multiplied by each other to equal 0, don't forget, x plus 6 has to equal 0, or x plus 10 has to equal 0. And get the 6 to the other side by subtracting 6. It's add 6, so we're going to subtract 6. And x equals negative 6. Get the 10 to the other side by subtracting 10, subtracting 10. And x equals negative 10. Here are my two answers, but I'm going to check. Do those two make the bottom equal a 0, a negative 6 or a negative 10? No, if I put negative 10 on the bottom, I get a number. I don't get 0. The only things that make this bottom equal to 0 is a negative 2 and a positive 4, and those are not my answers. So those are good answers. You will have two good answers for this problem. All righty. I mean, if you look, we're learning. I mean, this is day 2, remember, or day 2 or day 3 in college algebra. Do you see all this stuff they require you to know? I didn't teach you how to solve for x because that's understood. I mean, I did teach you because we're doing the correct, but if it was a straight college algebra class with no correct, they don't teach you all that stuff. They expect you to know that. All right, so we have two answers there. All right, I'm going to go to the next problem. Oh, I did something wrong. There we go. Can somebody tell me the answer to number 5? Well, I don't really want to do another one of these. Can look in the answer, tell me what the answer is in number 5, just in case it's something crazy.
It is 12 and negative 14.
Okay, so it's something very similar to we did. I just wanted to make sure there was an answer there that, I mean, if there were two answers, then it's something similar to the last problem we just did. So I'm not going to do it, but I'm going to at least tell you the LCD, right? The LCD is x minus 2, x plus 2, the bottom. All right. So that's it. Let's move on to number 6. This is solving different. It's very similar. I mean, very similar to what we did last week. So this solving for x is really similar to what we did last week. Our goal, this problem is solve. Don't forget, it's going to say solve. Solve means get x on one side and everything else to the other. X equals something. Our goal always is to get x by itself, or if you have an x square, get everything on the x square side. So I need to get rid of this radical, this square root symbol. And you can only get rid of a square root symbol when the square root is by itself on one side, and it is. The square root is over there by itself. If it was like this, let me just show you. If you had this on one side, you cannot do what I'm about to do. You have to take the 6 over. The square root, the radical has to be by itself, okay? So the radical is by itself on the left-hand side. What's the opposite of square rooting something? What's the opposite of square root? You guys know it. The opposite of square root? The opposite of multiplying is dividing. The opposite of adding is subtracting. What's the opposite of square root?
Squared it?
Yes, we talked about it. So you square both sides. We square both sides. When you square, square root and square cancel each other out, and I'm left with x plus 3 equals x minus 3. By the way, x minus 3 squared really means x minus 3 times x minus 3. You have to write it twice, okay? So that's what we end up with. We square both sides. Now the square root symbol is gone. Here I have to distribute. X times x is x squared. X times a negative 3, negative 3x. Negative 3 times x, negative 3x. Negative 3 times negative 3 is a positive 9. Okay, so that's what we're left with. We're solving for x. I'm just going through the solving steps. You just have to remember when you have a square root symbol, to get rid of it, it has to be by itself first. And secondly, you take the square. The opposite of square root is squaring. Remember last week we had something like this equals 6. Then we square rooted both sides. Square root and square cancel. And we had 2 answers. That was last week. When you take the square root of a square, you get 2 answers. However, when you take the square of a square root, you don't get 2 answers. So that might be better because you don't get 2 answers here. The right-hand side, combine like terms. These two can combine. Negative 3x minus 3x is a negative 6x. All right, I need to take when we have an x square, you have to take everything to the x square side. I will need to take this x, it's a plus x. I'm going to minus x. You have to take this 3 over, it's a plus 3. I'm going to minus 3. That turns a 0, that turns a 0. So on the left-hand side, I get 0 equals x squared. This is a 1. Don't forget, minus 6 minus 1 is a minus 7x. And 9 minus 3 is a plus 6. I have x squared minus 7x, and I need to factor. 6 is 1 times 6 and 2 times 3. The only way to get a negative 7, don't forget, the only way to get a negative 7 is a minus 1 and a minus 6. So this factors minus 1 minus 6 with an x and an x. Got to stay on top of this homework. Once you take a quiz or a test or something, you can't forget it. You can forget it at the end of the 8 weeks. Because once you finish college algebra, most people are done with math in college, unless you're going on to other things. You might have to take statistics, though. I'm left with 0 equals 2 things. The 0 multiply rule, x minus 1 equals 0, or x minus 6 equals 0. So get the 1 to the other side by adding 1. And that is an answer. Get the 6 to the other side by adding 6. And x equals 6. Now, these are the 2 answers I got. Somebody go to the back of the book and look at the answers, and then look in the back of the book. This is not an answer in the back of the book. Only the 6 is, I think. I haven't looked at the back of the book. I'm hoping I got it right. But 1 is not an answer. What's the answer in the back of the book? Is it just 6?
Just 6.
Yes. So I'm going to put it in red. This is not an answer. Why? Because just like the domain for the rational functions, you have to plug these numbers back in. Watch when I put 6 in here. 6 plus 3 is 9. Back in the original problem, the square root of 9 is 3. 6 minus 3 here is 3. 3 equals 3. That's a good answer. What happens if I put 1 in here? Watch this. 1 plus 3 is 4. The square root of 4 is 2. Put a 1 in here. 1 minus 3 is a negative 2. Do you see how they don't equal? For square roots, they have a domain also. And if it doesn't work, that is false. It doesn't work. Then that can't be part of my answer. This is the only answer for this problem, x equals 6. Even though we got 1 as an answer, but when we plugged it back in, it didn't work. So for all those rational functions that we previously did, you got to plug them in and make sure the bottom's not equal to 0. Also, when you do the square root ones, you got to plug them back in and make sure it holds true when you plug it back in. All these things to remember. All these things to remember. It's going to take a lot of practice. I really recommend when you're doing the homework in this section, look at similar examples, or in the help, it says show me an example. They show you an example and then they'll cross one out saying, oh, this one didn't work. So if the example shows you that one of the answers didn't work, then more than likely in the problem you're doing, one of the answers don't work. So check on that too. Look at those show me, or I think it says show me an example in the help box. Those are really helpful on when you can't get a problem and something's going on. All right. Number 7. I have the square root, the radical by itself. So I want to get rid of that radical symbol by squaring both sides. The opposite of square root is squaring. I'm going to square both sides. Square and square root cancel. I'm left with just the stuff inside, 3x plus 10. On the right-hand side, I have 5 minus 2x, but it's a square. So you have to write it down twice and distribute that. 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times a negative 2 is a negative 10x. Negative 2 times 5 is a negative 10x. And negative 2 times a negative 2 is a positive 4. X times x is x squared. Now I'm writing too big. I'm messing up my paper now. These two combine, so I'm left with 25 minus 20x plus 4x squared. And since I have an x squared, I need to take everything to the x squared side. The 10 needs to go over, and the 3x needs to go over. It's a plus 3x, so we minus 3x. I'm left with 0 equals 25 minus 10 is 15. 23 minus 3 is a negative 23x. And 4x squared. So the only way I've ever factored or done anything with x squares is I'm going to put the x squared first. So I have 0 equals 4x squared minus 23x plus 15. Do you see? I'm just changing the order of these so we have it like we normally do for factoring. There's no GCF. There's no greatest common factor here. So we have to factor using the AC method because there's a number in front of the x squared. So that's A, and this is C. AC, A times C, 4 times 15 is 60. All the things that multiply together to get 60 is 1 times 60. So we're factoring using AC, 2 times 30, 3 times 20, 4 times 15, 5 times 12, 6 times 10. And I need 23 right here. A minus and a minus. When I multiply those, I get a positive 60, and when I add them, I get a negative 23. When you multiply these two, you get a positive 60, and when you combine them, you get a negative 23. Negative 3x, here, these, remember, we split the middle with them, and negative 20x. Bring down this. Please stay up on this factoring. We split the middle, create 4 terms, factor the first parenthesis, group the first parentheses, group the second parentheses. If the third term is negative, the negative has to be in that parentheses. Make sure there's a plus sign between them. Factor out the first parentheses and x factors out. I can divide, uh-oh. Uh-oh, did I erase it? Okay, let me get back to where we were. And I ended up with 3x plus 10. I'm sorry. Uh-oh, I know. 5 minus 2x minus 5 minus 2x. And I ended up with 25 when I combined it all, minus 4x plus 4x squared. No, that's not right. Minus 20x. This is what I ended up with. And I got that to that side and that to that side. I ended up with 15 minus 23x plus 4x squared. Then I changed the order. Then we did the AC method, 4 times 5, and 4 times 15, and we used 3 times 20, which is a minus 20 and a minus 3. Okay, so I have 4x squared minus 23x plus 15 minus 3x minus 20x. All right, so this is where I'm at. We group the first two, we group the second two, make sure there's a plus sign between it. And x factors out of this first group. And I am left with, I'm really worried that I'm going to cancel it out again. One of these x's cancel, I'm left with 4x. Here the x's cancel, minus 3. Don't forget, when the third term is negative, like ours is, you have to factor out a negative. So I'm going to factor out a negative, and a 5 factors out, a negative 5. Negative 20 divided by negative 5 is a positive 4x. 15 divided by negative 5 is a negative 3. Do you see the parentheses are the same? So the parentheses factors out 4x minus 3. We have another parentheses with whatever's left over, x minus 5. All right. So we have to solve for x. X minus 5 equals 0. Take the 5 to the other side. Add 5, and x equals 5 is one answer. I can already see that that's not going to work. Oh no. So then I'm going to do over here 4x minus 3 equals 0. Take the 3 over, and then the 4 is 3 by adding 3. And then dividing by 4. And x equals 3/4. No. So these are the two answers I got through solving for x. I'll give you a second. I did those last steps fast. But that's, I mean, we should know how to solve for x by now. This problem is all about squaring both sides and then checking our answers. I don't think 5's an answer, and I'm going to show you why. Somebody look at the back of the book. Tell me what the answer is. I don't even know if 3/4 is an answer, but it probably is.
It's 3/4.
Okay, good. So if you plug 3/4 back in here and put it on your calculator, you'll see you'll get the same thing on both sides. But 5 times 3, do you see, if I put a 5 in there, I should put it in red. If I put a 5 in there, 3 times 5 is 15 plus 10. 15 plus 10 is 25. So I get the square root of 25. I get 5 on this side. But if I put 5 on this side, x, 5 minus 10, this is 2 times 5 is 10. 5 minus 10 is a negative 5. 5 does not equal negative 5. This does not work. So this is the only answer. By the way, square roots can never equal a negative answer. That's how I know. When I put a 5 in that problem, if I put a 5 there, I get 5 minus 10, and I end up with a negative answer. So, you know, if I put a 5 in here, I get 10. I get a negative answer. You can't have a negative answer when you take the square root. Square roots do not produce negative answers. That's how I knew right away that was not an answer, but this one probably was. If you plug it in there on the calculator, you should get that as an answer. Wow. So you're always checking these answers. Like I said, if you're getting the answer wrong, or if they tell you, hey, I think if you type both answers in the homework, they'll tell you, check your answers because one of them might not work. Okay, I think you're gonna like this one. I think we're gonna like number 8. I already told you when you got a square root, you get it by itself on one side. I have 2 third roots, cube roots, but they're both on the same side. So what I'm going to do is, hey, let's take one to the other side. It's look, this is a minus third root. The only way to get it to the other side, like an x, is by doing the opposite. Add the third root of 1 minus 8x. Add the third root of 1 minus 8x. That turns to 0, and I'm left with the third root of 4 plus 6x equals the third root of 1 minus 8x. Okay. So I just took that third root over to the other side. The next step is the opposite of third root. What's the opposite of third root? Third power. The opposite of third root is third power. Third power and third root cancel. We're left with 4 plus 6x. Third power and third root cancel. We're just left with 1 minus 8x. Do you see the root's not there anymore? And now we just solve for x. Get x's on one side. We don't even have to factor because there's no x square. I'm going to take the 8x over there. It's a minus 8x. I add 8x. 4 plus 14x equals 1. So I'm going to bring this up here. 4 plus 14x equals 1. That turned to 0. All right, so now I'm solving for x. I need to take the 4 to the other side and the 14 to the other side, keeping the x here. You always take the add and subtract. This is multiplying. This is adding to the side, so we do the opposite. Add and subtract goes to the other side. 4, subtract 4. 4 minus 4 is 0. So I'm just left with 14x on this side. Sorry, that's nothing. 1 minus 4 is a negative 3. Divide both sides by 14. divide both. Oh, wait. I'm missing the x. I'm sorry. It's 14x. Right? I had to take the 14 over. It's multiplying, so I'm going to divide by 14. And x equals a negative 3 over 14. By the way, on odd roots, you're allowed to have negative numbers, so when you plug that in, it's going to work. It's going to work. Only on even roots you have to check. Square roots, fourth roots, sixth root. So all square roots you have to check your answer. All fourth roots you have to check your answer. Third roots you don't have to check your answer. Whatever you get, that is the answer. Hopefully, if you did all the work right. So if you have those third roots or even two square roots on the same side, get them to different sides and then do the opposite. Opposite of squaring is second root. Opposite of square root is squaring. Opposite of third root is third power. Uh-oh, what? Log out successful. I didn't log out. There, I'm back. I'm telling you, I'm just clicking on all kinds of stuff. How many questions are in this section? Oh, no. Okay. There's a lot here. Okay, so don't forget this. This is kind of really important. Remember, the bottom is the root, the top is the power. Yeah. So another way of writing this, I just want to show you another way of writing this is the fourth root of x plus 4 plus 3 equals 0. They're the same thing. It's the same thing. I just want you to remember, we talked about this last week. These two are the same thing, but I'm going to stick with this. I'm going to stick with this down here, okay? So get the radical, even here, get the radical by itself. So I want to take the 3 to the other side by subtracting 3. And I have x plus 4 to the 1/4 power equals negative 3. Okay, the opposite, now I want you to get used to this method also. It's the same thing. The opposite of fourth root is 4 power, if I had it right. So that's what I'm going to do over here. I'm multiplying both sides by the 4 power. I'm multiplying it by the 4 power. I'm raising it to the 4 power. I'm raising this side to the 4 power. This power to the 4th power. On your calculator, 1/4 times 4 is 1. By the way, this whole side is to the 4th power. That's why I'm putting it in parentheses. And another way of writing this, x plus 4 to the 1 power is just x plus 4. And that negative 3, even though it's not in the parentheses here, when you raise it to a power, you have to put that whole side. That's why I put it in parentheses, the whole side to the power. If you put this in your calculator with parentheses, 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 is 27, times 3 is 81. You get a positive 81. And then I just take the 4 to the other side. Minus 4, and I get x equals 77. And when I plug this back in, 77 plus 4 is 81. The 4th root of 81 is 3. 3 plus 3 does not equal 0. Did I write it down correctly? Oh, that doesn't work. Look, I mean, this is the answer I got, but if you look in the back of the book, does the back of the book say empty set again? You have to check your answer.
Yeah, it
I'm,
says empty
I'm,
set.
yeah, I'm gonna erase this. I'm gonna leave it like this for a second. Then I'm gonna erase it and show you where, and we're gonna plug it in the calculator, okay? Because it doesn't work. I'm gonna actually show you how to plug this one in the calculator. It doesn't work. So we are going to plug, do you see my answer is x equals 77. So I'm going to plug this into the calculator exactly like this. 77 plus 4 to the 1/4 power plus 3. And the answer should be 0 if it works. So 77 plus 4 to the 1/4 power. I'm not going to remember. Somebody's going to have to tell me in here in a second. As soon as I go to the next page, I'm going to forget. If I can even get there. Come on, where? There we go. So we're going to try to plug it into our calculator exactly as we saw it. Parentheses 77 plus 4, close parentheses. Then we're going to raise it to the 1/4 power fraction. 1 arrow down 4 power. And then I'm going to arrow over and arrow over one more time. Then it said plus 3. So this is exactly when we plug it in, what it looks like, the original problem. And it says it equals 0. When I hit enter, it equals 6. 6 does not equal 0. That's why 77 is not an answer. So when I plug it back in here, I get, 3 plus 3 equals 0, 6 equals 0. No, x equals 77 is not the answer, so there's no solution. Or you can say, same thing, the empty set. It's empty. You have to, do you see? This is the 4th root. Even roots you have to check. Square root, 4th root. For a 3rd root or a 5th root, you don't have to check. Only for even roots, because even roots you can't have negative radicals, negative square roots. All right. Oh, this one looks easy. Look how small it is. Okay, let's see what happens. It's x to the 2/5 power. So we need to get rid of this 2/5. The only way you do this is multiply by its reciprocal, like we did that other one, 5 over 2. So we do it to both sides, 5 over 2. If you look on your calculator, 2/5 times 5 over 2 equals 1. X to the 1 power is just x. Put 9 to the 5 over 2 power on your calculator. 9 raised to the fraction 5 over 2. You should get 243. And that's the answer. You guys like this one? You probably like the next one too. So we're always going to do the power to the reciprocal because it turns that power into 1. That's what we're looking for, x to the 1 power. Three-fourths. Okay, x is by itself, so I just multiply by its reciprocal. 3/4, flip it upside down, 4 over 3, 4 over 3. So this ends up being 1, x to the 1 power equals 8, 4 over 3. X equals, when you do this, I think you get 16. 8 to the 4/3 power. I like that. I like those.
That is 16.
Okay, good. These aren't too bad. The rest of these are a bear. I mean, the ones previous to this, how many more we got? We got 12 and 13. Two more. I'm only going to do one of those two. Hang on, I'm trying to. We hope. Hopefully we get a whole bunch like this. Okay, so we're going to do number 12, and then we're going to do 13. I'm not going to do number 13. We're just going to do number 12. I'm going to say number 13 is not on the test. I'll look at it really quick, but this one, we have to factor. So we actually did one of these last week or the week before, factoring. When we learned how to factor, we did one of these. There's a 1 in front of the x4. Remember when we factored an x4 problem? There's a 1 in front. That's okay. We treat it just the easy factoring method, 36. 1 times 36 is 36. 2 times 18. 3 times 12 is 36. 4 times 9 is 36. And 6 times 6. How do I get a -5? Out of all of these, I need to get a -5. Help me out.
-9 plus 4.
Yes, thank you very much. And so this factors to a +4 and a -9. And we're not using x's, we're using x squares because we have x to the 4th power, if you remember. And if you remember when we did an x4, we had to check to see if we could factor now 2 terms. This does not factor 2 terms. Can somebody tell me why this does not factor something square, something square? Why does this one not factor? You guys got to know this. This first one, why does it not factor? Why can
Because
you
it's a
not
plus
factor
sign?
that one? Say that again.
Because it's a plus sign?
Yes, 2 terms, you have to have a negative in the middle. So this does not factor. But this one does. Something squared minus something squared. X and 3. 3 squared is 9. So this factors to x plus 3, x minus 3, if you remember factoring 2 terms. This is what I got. That's not the answer, but that's where I'm at this point. Okay, then I'm going to, I thought I almost erased it. I'm just going to erase this part. So there's this x squared plus 4 equals 0. If I get the 4 to the other side, x squared equals -4. Square root both sides. X equals plus or minus 4i. But I think they don't want us to have 4 i's. They didn't say imaginary numbers are okay, so I'm going to say, they didn't say put your answer in imaginary form or, with an imaginary number i's. So you can't take the square root.
Has the i's.
Say that again.
The answer key has -2i and 2i.
Oh God. All right. So the answer key has it. Do you see? This is why it confuses me. Last time, remember, we did a problem where it didn't have it. This time it does have it. Okay. I promise you on the test it won't be confusing because I'll have it written there to put the I or not. Oh, by the way, I actually wrote the answer down wrong because the square root of 4 is 2. and the I, square root of negative I is, square root of negative is I. So we do have two answers, plus or minus. There's a plus or minus when you square root a square. 2I. We have two answers there. But we still have answers over here. X plus 3 equals 0. Take the 3 to the other side. And x equals 3. Here is the other answer. X minus 3 equals 0. Take the 3 to the other side by adding 3. And x equals 3. So you should have four answers. X equals 2I. X equals minus 2I. That's what that plus or minus 4 is. So there are four answers for this problem. 1, 2, 3, 4. Don't forget, if you have a minus in two terms, and this is a perfect square where you can find a square, then you have to factor it again. A plus, you cannot factor it. Or if this was like a 5, not a perfect square, you couldn't factor it anyway. So we do have four answers for this problem. I'm not going to do problem 13. Let me just take a quick look at it. I mean, this was a long enough section. Yeah, you have to use the AC method to factor that. Good luck. Yeah, we're not going to have anything like that on the test. You might have to do it on the homework. I'm just going to set it up for you. Bring the 15 over by subtracting 15. So you have 8(4) plus 2x squared minus 5. And then use the AC method to factor it. So if you want to go through it, use the AC method to factor it. Then you might have to factor it again, you know, because of the 4. Your answer will be something x squared, and then if you can, you factor it again. If not, then those were your answers. So I'm not going to actually do that. I just wanted to set. We won't have a 4 with an x square anywhere on the test.